My name is Nathan Garza, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And as a young coach in this industry, this book's made a tremendous impact on me, and I think that I can have that same impact on all of your various programs. Some background information on myself. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. Beautiful skyline. From there, I made my way up to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I played collegiate baseball at Oral Roberts University. Many of you in this room kind of know me for my achievements on the mound. I believe I led the country in hours spent in the training room. I think that was a stat. But most of you don't know me. But I'm still seeing like some weird looks. Like I know this. I've seen him somewhere. And the answer to that is I'm Twitter famous. And some background information on that. My last year at Oral Roberts, I was caught in the back of the dugout apparently eating pizza on national television. Take a look right there. In my defense, it was Jimmy John's. Okay, had to hit my protein window. Okay, but in all seriousness, I had a great experience at Oral Roberts. I did a couple summer internships down there, learned a lot, and through my connections that I made, I was able to make it up to Fargo in August of this past year as a paid intern here on the Olympic side. And almost immediately upon arriving, I know a lot of you former Bison in this room can attest to that, I knew something was different. The way that Coach Miller managed his staff, the way that he managed his teams and interacted with his athletes, I could tell that something was just different about this culture. And after I got a chance to read the 5 dysfunctions of a team, I understood why. And just like QBQ, it's a really easy read, guys. Lencioni tells stories throughout the whole thing. He's got interesting characters, you can relate to it, and he kind of weaves those dysfunctions throughout the story, and you're able to relate and see how they can lead to the demise of basically any team. And I'm going to be touching on all of them, but I'm really going to hammer home 3 of the dysfunctions that I believe are most applicable to us as strength coaches today. That first dysfunction is the absence of trust. And when you think about trust, it's a pretty simple concept, right? I trust you, you trust me, we're all on the same page, that kind of thing. But no, Lencioni emphasizes vulnerability-based trust. What does that mean? That means you have to be able to admit your weaknesses, know when to ask for help, be able to handle criticism. That's being vulnerable. And for an example, for me, when I first arrived here, I'm sure a lot of you former staff members can attest, you go through something called Staff Devo, where you get taken through the same progressions and movements that we take our athletes through, so you can be better coaches and you know how we want things to be done. And being a former athlete, they like to call me a 1/5 athlete around here because I was a pitcher, but being a former athlete and having some experience in the weight room, I thought I was pretty good at some of the stuff. Turns out, not quite so much. So going through that Staff Devo kind of opened my eyes. I'm not quite as good as this stuff as I thought I was. These guys know more than me. They've got more experience than me. Maybe I have something to learn. I can grow and become a better coach. I had to be vulnerable. That's the main thing that he emphasizes with that first dysfunction, the absence of trust. And with that, it has to be consistent, guys. A lot of you in this room are former athletes, and I'm sure you guys can all think back to a team that you were on that was extremely talented, that didn't really have the success that it should have. Kind of think back to why that didn't happen. And a lot of it's because there were certain either individuals or groups of people that weren't in line with the team's philosophies or standard. They were pulling on the opposite end of the rope. So in order for a team to be truly functional, that trust has to be 100% consistent throughout the board. Each staff member has to trust that we're all in this together, we're all trying to move our program forward so we can become a more functional team. That leads me into that second dysfunction, which is the fear of conflict. Okay, and when we think about conflict, a lot of you guys, the first thing that comes to your mind is what Happy Gilmore is doing to Bob Barker right there. But no, the conflict that we're talking about here is that healthy, productive conflict, the disagreement, the different ideas that we have that make our programs grow. And early on, it brings a story to mind. I believe it was my second week here, and here at NDSU, we kind of pride ourselves on being able to get a large amount of people in and out of the room in a quick manner, whether it's through the way that we structure and organize and the flow of our room. And I think baseball was on squats. I had a couple racks of rookies. I think it might have been their first day. We were doing front squats, something like that. And my racks had fallen behind the rest of the group. And we had gotten down, everyone else had finished. I still had a rack with probably like 3 guys left to go. So I know something's wrong. And, Coach Miller addressed me. Hey, Coach Garza, you got to keep those guys up with the rest of the group. You got to keep them on pace so we can get this thing done, right? And at that moment, I could have melted, right? He addressed me. I knew that I wasn't doing things to our standard, but I trusted Coach that he was coming from a good place, that he was addressing that issue to make me better so I wouldn't make that mistake the second time. And on the flip side, Coach Miller could have let that go. I'm going to take it easy on Nate. It's his second week here. I might address it later after the group. But we all know that if we let mistakes go uncorrected, they become ingrained. It becomes habit, right? So he knew that mistake needed to be corrected right there so that I could become a better coach for it. And another thing that I struggled with, and I think a lot of young coaches struggle with for the first time going to either a new program or a new position, is interacting with those athletes. And I think right when I got here, no one wants to be the guy that's constantly harping on their athletes, right? You want your athletes to like you, but at the same time, not every athlete's going to like you. We need to be coaches first, right? And if we can get our kids to respect us first and buy into what we're telling them, then that's a win in my book. That's how we create change. So you have to get your kids to respect you and buy into what you're doing first. Don't worry about being friends with them, right? That leads me in to that third dysfunction, which is the lack of commitment. I'm just going to briefly touch on that. And essentially all that Lencioni is talking about with the lack of commitment is that once the team or the group makes a decision, whatever it may be, everyone has to be on board with that decision moving forward. Even if that idea wasn't yours or you weren't on board with it when it was being discussed, once the group makes it and decides that that's the route we're going to take, then they have to move forward. You can't be 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out the door, because eventually it's going to come back to get you at some point, right? That's the third dysfunction, the lack of commitment. That leads me into that fourth one, which is the avoidance of accountability. And with accountability, unlike in QBQ, which addresses personal accountability, the 5 dysfunctions of a team addresses peer-to-peer or team accountability. And if the team has that strong peer-to-peer accountability, then issues get resolved quickly. They don't have to make its way up to the top. Every single issue doesn't have to make its way up to the top to get resolved, right? And on the flip side of that, if the team knows that the leader isn't holding them accountable, then why are they going to hold each other accountable? Because they know that the issue is just going to go unresolved anyways. So it has to be consistent. And for us as strength coaches, when I think about accountability, a word that comes to mind is process. And in order for a process to work, it has to be flawless, right? No part of that process can be broken. And just like a chain link, just like here, if one link's broken, that thing isn't strong, right? And a couple examples come to mind with field experience. After a couple months of being here at NDSU, I got the responsibility of taking our field experience students through the same progressions that I was taken through. And if that process wasn't perfect, say Coach Rasmussen decided, I'm going to teach Nate how to squat differently than we would teach our athletes. How am I supposed to teach our field experience kids the correct way? Or if Coach Mead said, I'm going to teach Nate how to double A skip, which I'm still terrible at and can't do, how to double A skip differently. How am I going to be able to take a group through that movement? Okay. Another thing that comes to mind is our lifting progressions. We have a couple different progressions, whether it's Olympic movement, squat, anything like that. We've got a certain progression that we take every athlete through, and they work if they're done right. You can't skip steps. If steps are skipped, at some point down the line, failure is going to happen. But if you take each step the right way, then eventually that kid's going to have success. That's accountability. And that leads me into that last dysfunction, which is inattention to results. And inattention to results, one thing comes to mind here. Coach Miller said this to me a couple different times, and it's really become ingrained, and it's something that I think of all the time. And as strength coaches, really evaluate your program and your staff. Are you having success because of or in spite of your process? And if you are having success in spite of your process, evaluate what part of that process is flawed. Whether it's with staff development or taking your kids through proper progressions, it could be anything. But I think it's our job to evaluate at the end of the day, am I doing things the right way? Am I having success because of what I'm doing? Or am I having success in spite of what I'm doing? And as you can see, each dysfunction builds up off of each other. Lencioni emphasizes that in order for a team to be truly cohesive and truly functional, that you can't just pick and choose which one you want to have. A team can't have that vulnerability-based trust, but still be afraid to hold each other accountable to certain things. It doesn't work. For a team to have that success, it needs to have them all. And if you think about it, everyone here in this room, in some form or manner, is connected to NDSU. We're all a team. And our industry, more so than any other, is built on connection and our network. It's how we get new jobs. It's how we grow. It's how we learn from each other, like at a conference like this. And I believe that if we can create stronger, more cohesive units at our various programs, we are moving our profession forward. And we've addressed personal accountability. We've addressed how to function as a successful team. And lastly, we're going to address today how to become more efficient and effective communicators. And Coach Rasmussen is going to do that. Thank you.